Far too many people lose their peace the moment someone decides to provoke them, and that is often exactly what the other person intended. The words themselves are rarely the real weapon. The real weapon is the reaction they provoke. A sarcastic remark, a dismissive smile, or a carefully aimed insult can turn an ordinary moment into an emotional battle before reason has time to speak. Most conflicts are not won by the person with the strongest argument. They are won by the person who succeeds in pulling someone else out of their composure. The moment another person controls your emotions, they have already gained more influence over you than they deserve. The Stoics understood this truth long before the modern world gave it new names. They knew that real strength is not found in controlling other people, but in refusing to let other people control you. A calm mind is difficult to manipulate because it does not surrender itself to every passing emotion. It remains anchored in judgment instead of impulse. That quiet mastery is not reserved for extraordinary people. It is a discipline developed through countless ordinary moments, when the choice between reaction and restraint quietly shapes the kind of person you become. The remarkable thing is that this kind of strength is almost invisible. It does not seek attention or announce itself through louder words. It appears in the brief pause before you respond, in the decision to protect your peace instead of your pride, and in the ability to walk away from conflicts that were never worth carrying. Over time, those quiet choices become more than habits. They become character, and once that happens, very few people possess the power to disturb your inner world. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Perhaps they questioned your intelligence, mocked your choices, or spoke with just enough disrespect to make your emotions rise before your mind had time to catch up. In moments like these, most reactions feel automatic, as though another person has pressed a hidden button inside you. The mind is designed to notice threats before it has time to evaluate them. A careless sentence can seem far more important than it truly is because it touches pride, fear, or insecurity. Before reason has time to speak, emotion has already made its case. Many conflicts begin with moments that could have ended with a single calm breath instead of an immediate reply. Provocation succeeds because it asks for speed. It invites you to react before you have the chance to choose. The faster your response, the easier it becomes for another person to shape the direction of the conversation. What feels like defending your dignity often becomes surrendering your peace, because your attention shifts away from your own values and toward proving something to someone else. At that point, your emotional state depends less on your own judgment than on another person's behavior. The exchange is invisible, but its effects last far longer than the moment itself. You leave the conversation, yet your mind keeps replaying every word, every expression, and every response you wish you had given. The Stoics observed that very little can disturb a disciplined mind without first receiving permission from within. They never suggested pretending that hurtful words do not sting. Instead, they encouraged a deeper awareness. The first emotion may appear on its own, but the story you continue telling yourself afterward is where lasting suffering begins. One careless comment becomes an evening of arguments inside your own mind. A brief disagreement turns into hours of imagined conversations. The moment itself lasted only seconds. The mind keeps it alive for hours because it quietly believes that replaying it will somehow restore a sense of control. This habit is more common than most people realize. The mind often mistakes repeated thinking for meaningful progress. It assumes that replaying an insult will eventually produce the perfect response or erase the discomfort altogether. Yet the opposite usually happens. Every repetition strengthens the emotional memory instead of dissolving it. The words grow heavier because they are carried far beyond the moment in which they were spoken. Gradually, another person's opinion begins occupying space that should belong to your own thoughts. Space that could have been used for clearer judgment, wiser decisions, or simply enjoying the life unfolding in front of you. Notice how easily attention becomes attached to whatever challenges the ego. Praise feels pleasant, but criticism often lingers because it seems to demand an answer. The desire to explain yourself can become almost irresistible. Still, not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Some people are searching for clarity, while others are searching for a reaction. Marcus Aurelius expressed this clearly when he wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Learning the difference protects far more than your mood. It protects your ability to remain guided by principles instead of impulses. That quiet distinction changes every difficult interaction because it reminds you that self-respect does not require constant self-defense. Real strength appears where most people never think to look. It lives in the brief pause before words leave your mouth. That pause is not weakness. It is not hesitation or fear. It is evidence that your judgment remains in command even while emotion asks to take control. A calm response is often built during a silent moment that nobody else notices. While another person expects immediate resistance, you give yourself enough time to separate facts from feelings. Suddenly the situation changes. The insult loses much of its force because you no longer experience it as an emergency demanding instant action. That single pause becomes the place where freedom quietly begins. If this way of thinking speaks to you, consider subscribing. By doing so, you are choosing to invest in something deeper than information. You are choosing a practice of reflection, self-mastery, and steady growth. Each conversation is another opportunity to strengthen your mind, deepen your character, and apply the timeless principles of Stoicism where they matter most, in everyday life. Healthy boundaries still matter, and difficult conversations sometimes need honest responses. The difference lies in the source of those responses. They should come from deliberate judgment rather than wounded pride. When your actions are chosen instead of triggered, they reflect your character instead of someone else's influence. That shift may seem subtle, yet it changes everything. You stop reacting because you were pushed, and you start responding because it aligns with the kind of person you are trying to become. Once you begin recognizing this invisible exchange, another thought naturally emerges. Every provocation presents two opportunities at the same time. One invites you to surrender your inner balance for the temporary satisfaction of being right. The other invites you to preserve something far more valuable than victory in a single conversation. The choice is rarely easy, but it becomes clearer with practice. If reacting so quickly gives away your power, then perhaps real strength has never been about overpowering another person. Perhaps it has always been about remaining steady enough that nobody else can quietly take command of your mind. That realization does not arrive all at once. It grows through ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. Each time you resist the urge to answer immediately, you strengthen a habit that slowly reshapes your character. Each calm decision becomes evidence that your peace is no longer controlled by passing emotions. Over weeks and months, people may notice your composure, but the greater change happens within. You begin trusting yourself more than your impulses. That quiet confidence cannot be borrowed from praise or taken away by criticism, because it has been built through repeated choices instead of temporary feelings. Real strength rarely announces itself through louder words or sharper arguments. Instead, it appears in the quiet space between what happens to you and how you decide to respond. Most people believe self-control is about suppressing emotions, but Stoicism points to something much deeper. It is about refusing to let passing emotions become permanent decisions. Every insult presents two opportunities. One is to react immediately and continue the conflict. The other is to pause long enough to remember that another person's behavior belongs to them, while your character belongs to you. As Epictetus wisely said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That small pause may seem insignificant, yet it quietly separates those who are ruled by circumstances from those who govern themselves. At first, that pause feels almost unnatural because the mind has been trained to believe that immediate reactions are signs of confidence. Many people fear that remaining calm will make them appear weak, passive, or unable to defend themselves. Yet calmness is not surrender. It is the refusal to let another person's emotions become the architect of your behavior. There is a quiet confidence in choosing your next words instead of allowing your first alone. It is measured by what you consistently practice when life places that knowledge under pressure. Even after recognizing what is happening, the urge to defend yourself can still appear with surprising intensity. The mind naturally wants fairness, validation, and the satisfaction of proving someone wrong. That desire is deeply human because most people grow up believing that being misunderstood is something that must always be corrected. A false accusation feels like a threat. An unfair judgment feels like an attack on your identity. Without realizing it, you begin treating every disagreement as though your worth depends on changing another person's opinion. Yet the harder you chase that approval, the further it often moves away, leaving you exhausted instead of understood. This is where Stoic discipline becomes practical rather than theoretical. Instead of asking how to win the argument, you begin asking whether the argument deserves your attention at all. That single shift in perspective transforms the purpose of every difficult conversation. Your goal is no longer to leave feeling victorious. Your goal is to leave with your judgment, composure, and peace still intact. Those are achievements another person's approval can never provide. Once you understand that, many situations that once felt urgent begin appearing surprisingly small. The mind often confuses silence with surrender because it has been conditioned to believe that every unanswered criticism becomes an accepted truth. Yet reality rarely works that way. People who know your character will not suddenly abandon their understanding of you because of one accusation. Those determined to misunderstand you will rarely change their minds because of one perfect explanation. In both cases, endless defense accomplishes very little. The need to answer everything usually satisfies the ego more than it serves wisdom. Letting go of that need creates room for something much more valuable than being right. There is also another cost hidden beneath constant self-defense. Every unnecessary argument consumes attention that could have been invested elsewhere. While your mind replays conversations, life quietly continues moving forward. Opportunities appear and disappear. Relationships deserving of care wait patiently, while emotional energy remains trapped inside conflicts that produce no lasting benefit. One difficult interaction can influence an entire day if you continue carrying it from one moment to the next. Eventually you realize that some people have occupied your thoughts far longer than they ever occupied your actual life. The Stoics encouraged examining the true price of every emotional investment. Before responding, they would ask whether the outcome justified the effort required. That habit remains just as valuable now as it was centuries ago. Every conversation asks for something in return. Sometimes it asks for patience. Sometimes it asks for honesty. Other times it quietly demands your peace. The wise person learns to recognize the difference before paying a price that cannot easily be recovered. Time, attention, and inner calm are limited resources. Spending them wisely becomes an expression of self-respect rather than avoidance. Something interesting happens when you stop feeling responsible for correcting every misunderstanding. The emotional pressure begins fading almost immediately. Instead of carrying the impossible task of controlling another person's thoughts, you return your attention to the one place where meaningful influence has always existed: your own choices. There is remarkable freedom in accepting that another person's opinion belongs to them just as your character belongs to you. They may judge you unfairly, criticize you carelessly, or refuse to see your intentions clearly. None of those actions have the power to redefine who you are unless you quietly accept their judgment as your own. This perspective also changes the way you listen. Instead of hearing every criticism as a personal attack, you become more capable of separating useful observations from emotional noise. Occasionally, someone points out a genuine weakness worth improving. Other times, they simply reveal their own frustrations through their words. Remaining calm allows you to recognize the difference without becoming defensive too quickly. Ironically, people who are less eager to defend themselves often become more open to genuine growth because they are no longer confusing every uncomfortable comment with a threat to their identity. There will always be individuals who mistake calmness for weakness. Some may even increase their efforts when they realize they cannot provoke the reaction they expected. Yet their persistence often reveals the very thing they hope to hide. People searching desperately for conflict usually depend upon conflict for their sense of significance. They need resistance because resistance gives their emotions somewhere to settle. Refusing to provide that emotional reward quietly changes the entire interaction. The conflict begins losing momentum because one side no longer continues feeding it with unnecessary energy. Gradually, conversations stop becoming contests that must be won. They become opportunities to practice discernment, patience, and deliberate choice. You begin speaking because your words serve a purpose rather than because your emotions demand release. Sometimes that purpose is honesty. Sometimes it is setting a clear boundary. Sometimes it is choosing silence because silence communicates more strength than another explanation ever could. As Epictetus observed, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. The remarkable thing is that people cannot easily manipulate someone who no longer feels obligated to prove their worth. That confidence grows quietly through repeated practice until protecting your peace becomes more important than protecting your pride, and that is the moment difficult conversations begin losing their power over you. Once you stop measuring success by your ability to defeat every criticism, a different kind of confidence begins to emerge. It is quieter than the confidence built on applause, and far more stable than the confidence that depends upon winning arguments. For a long time, it may feel unfamiliar because it does not ask for constant proof. It does not require every misunderstanding to be corrected or every accusation to be answered. Instead, it grows from a simple realization that your character is shaped by your choices, not by another person's opinion of them. The more deeply this truth settles into your mind, the less emotional pressure you feel whenever someone questions your worth. You begin noticing that calmness often communicates far more strength than endless explanations ever could. A brief, composed response carries a quiet certainty that emotional arguments cannot imitate, because it reveals that your peace no longer depends on changing another person's opinion. There is something deeply unsettling about meeting hostility with genuine composure. People expecting resistance often lose their sense of direction when they are met with patience instead. They prepared themselves for conflict, yet they encounter someone who refuses to let the conversation become a contest of emotions. That refusal is not an attempt to appear superior. It is simply the result of no longer believing that every challenge deserves the same amount of attention. Many people spend years trying to protect an image rather than developing a character. They carefully manage how they appear, how they are perceived, and how quickly others approve of them. While there is nothing wrong with wanting to be understood, there is a danger in allowing that desire to become the foundation of your identity. The moment your value depends upon another person's agreement, your emotional stability becomes fragile. Every compliment lifts you higher than it should, and every criticism pulls you lower than it deserves. The Stoics warned against placing your peace in things that can be taken away by circumstances beyond your control, and few things change more quickly than public opinion. This does not mean becoming indifferent to feedback or pretending that every criticism is meaningless. Wisdom listens carefully before deciding what deserves acceptance. Some observations reveal blind spots you genuinely need to address. Others reflect misunderstandings that require clarification. Still, others are nothing more than passing judgments shaped by another person's frustrations or expectations. The challenge is learning to distinguish one from the other without allowing emotion to make that decision for you. Calmness creates the space where discernment becomes possible. Without that pause, everything feels equally urgent, and every opinion seems equally important. One of the most liberating moments in personal growth arrives when you realize that not every voice deserves equal influence over your thinking. People speak from different levels of experience, different values, and different intentions. Some want to encourage growth, others simply want to express their own dissatisfaction. If you accept every opinion with the same seriousness, your direction will constantly change depending on who spoke most recently. A disciplined mind learns to weigh advice rather than absorb it automatically. That habit protects both humility and confidence at the same time, allowing you to improve without becoming emotionally dependent upon outside validation. This kind of confidence is often misunderstood because it does not seek attention. It does not announce itself through louder words or dramatic displays of certainty. Instead, it appears through consistency. A person who remains respectful under pressure earns trust without demanding it. Someone who can disagree without becoming hostile demonstrates strength without needing to advertise it. These qualities rarely produce immediate admiration, yet they leave a lasting impression because they reveal stability instead of performance. Over time, people begin noticing that your reactions are no longer dictated by the emotional climate around you. They recognize a steadiness that cannot be easily shaken. Ironically, the less desperate you become to defend yourself, the more naturally your confidence becomes visible to everyone around you. This happens because genuine confidence is difficult to imitate. It is reflected in relaxed conversations, thoughtful pauses, and the willingness to let silence exist without rushing to fill it. There is no urgency to convince everyone. There is no constant search for approval hidden beneath every sentence. The need to perform gradually fades because your attention shifts from protecting an image to protecting your principles. That subtle change transforms not only how other people experience you, but also how you experience yourself. As your perspective continues changing, conflict itself begins looking different. Instead of viewing disagreements as personal battles, you start seeing them as opportunities to practice clarity, patience, and restraint. Some situations still require firm boundaries. Others require honest conversations that cannot be avoided. Yet even those moments feel different because they are no longer driven by wounded pride. They are guided by intention. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." You speak because something meaningful needs to be expressed, not because your emotions demand immediate release. That distinction makes every conversation more purposeful and far less exhausting. Gradually, your attention moves away from asking whether someone respects you and toward asking whether your own actions deserve respect. This inward standard creates remarkable freedom because it cannot be manipulated as easily by changing circumstances. Praise becomes pleasant without becoming necessary. Criticism becomes informative without becoming destructive. Success is measured less by external approval and more by internal consistency. The peace that follows is not accidental. It is the natural result of building your identity upon values that remain steady even when opinions change from one day to the next. And with that confidence comes another realization that quietly changes the way you approach conflict altogether. You begin understanding that your greatest victories will rarely be the arguments you win. They will be the moments when you preserve your clarity while others surrender theirs, when you protect your peace instead of your pride, and when your actions remain faithful to your principles, regardless of how another person chooses to behave. That quiet discipline becomes part of who you are, and once it does, fewer people possess the ability to disturb the calm you have patiently built from within. Not every battle deserves to become part of your life. Many people spend years carrying memories of arguments that change nothing except their own peace of mind. They replay conversations, imagine better responses, and continue fighting battles long after everyone else has forgotten them. A brief disagreement that lasted only a few minutes somehow occupies hours of quiet thought. An unkind remark spoken in passing becomes the center of an entire evening. Without noticing it, the mind transforms temporary events into lasting burdens, giving them far more influence than they ever deserved. What should have remained a passing moment quietly becomes part of the story you continue telling yourself. Stoicism invites you to ask a different question. Will this matter to your character tomorrow, next month, or years from now? That question changes the way you evaluate conflict, because it shifts your attention away from temporary emotions and toward lasting values. Some situations genuinely require courage. Others require patience. Many require nothing more than the wisdom to walk away. The challenge lies in recognizing which response belongs to each moment. A mind that reacts to everything eventually loses the ability to distinguish between what is important and what is merely distracting. That is why protecting your peace is not simply about avoiding uncomfortable conversations. It is about refusing to train your mind to live in a constant state of emotional readiness. Many people unknowingly carry yesterday's arguments into today's opportunities. They become suspicious where trust is possible, defensive where curiosity would be more helpful, and exhausted before any real challenge has even appeared. The weight they carry is often invisible, but its effects touch every part of their lives. Relationships become strained. Decisions become clouded. Moments that should have been enjoyed become overshadowed by thoughts that should have been released long ago. There is something deeply freeing about realizing that your attention is one of your most valuable possessions. Every person who succeeds in holding your thoughts long after they have left your presence has received something precious from you. Time cannot be recovered. Mental energy cannot be endlessly renewed without care. The Stoics understood this well. They treated attention as something worthy of protection because wherever attention remains, life quietly follows. If your thoughts remain trapped inside unnecessary conflict, they cannot fully participate in the present moment where meaningful living actually takes place. As this understanding deepens, another subtle transformation begins taking place. You stop feeling responsible for carrying every emotional burden placed before you. Someone else's anger no longer becomes your obligation to resolve. Another person's disappointment no longer automatically becomes your personal failure. Their opinions remain theirs. Their emotions remain theirs. Your responsibility lies in deciding what deserves entrance into your own mind. That decision becomes one of the greatest expressions of inner freedom because it reminds you that boundaries exist not only in your actions, but also in your attention. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or indifferent toward others. Compassion remains important, but compassion does not require emotional entanglement. You can listen without absorbing another person's frustration. You can understand someone's pain without allowing it to govern your own peace. Healthy empathy recognizes another person's experience while remembering where your own responsibility begins and ends. Without that distinction, kindness slowly turns into emotional exhaustion because you begin carrying burdens that were never yours to hold. Gradually, protecting your peace stops feeling like avoidance and starts becoming an intentional expression of wisdom. You begin recognizing that every unnecessary conflict you decline creates room for something better, more patience, more thoughtful conversations, more meaningful work, more presence with the people who truly matter. Instead of measuring your day by how many arguments you survived, you begin measuring it by how much clarity you preserved. That shift changes the atmosphere of everyday life in ways that are both quiet and profound. Eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. The situations that once controlled your emotions begin losing their influence altogether. The comments that once lingered in your mind become passing sounds rather than lasting wounds. You notice the difference in ordinary moments before you notice it during major challenges. Someone speaks impatiently, and instead of carrying that impatience with you for the rest of the day, you simply allow it to pass. A careless opinion no longer follows you home. An unfair judgment no longer becomes the subject of endless conversations inside your own mind. Nothing about the outside world has necessarily changed. The real change has taken place within the way you relate to it. This transformation often happens so gradually that it is easy to overlook. There is rarely a single day when everything suddenly feels different. Instead, it appears through countless small decisions repeated over time. Each moment of restraint becomes another quiet investment in your character. Each unnecessary argument you release strengthens your ability to remain steady during the next one. Little by little, the habits that once fueled emotional exhaustion begin losing their place in your daily life. What once demanded enormous effort eventually becomes your natural response, because your mind has learned a new pattern. One of the clearest signs of this growth is that silence no longer feels uncomfortable. Earlier in life, silence may have seemed like defeat, as though every unanswered criticism somehow diminished your value. Now it carries an entirely different meaning. It reflects confidence rather than uncertainty. It demonstrates that your peace is no longer dependent upon receiving the final word. There is tremendous freedom in no longer feeling compelled to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you. Some people will understand your intentions, others will not. Your responsibility is to remain faithful to your principles rather than becoming consumed by every opinion that crosses your path. The Stoics believed that genuine freedom begins the moment your inner life is no longer governed by external circumstances. This does not mean withdrawing from the world or becoming emotionally detached from everyone around you. It means participating in life without allowing every passing event to dictate your state of mind. Joy becomes more genuine because it is no longer built entirely upon praise. Peace becomes more stable because it is no longer threatened by criticism. Even difficult experiences begin losing some of their power because they are met by a mind that has practiced remaining grounded instead of immediately reacting. You also begin noticing subtle changes in your relationships. Conversations become calmer because you are no longer trying to win every disagreement. People who seek honest discussion often respond positively to your composure because calmness encourages calmness. Those who only wanted conflict frequently lose interest when they discover they cannot easily provoke the reaction they expected. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. In either case, your emotional well-being no longer depends upon controlling the outcome. That independence creates healthier boundaries because you stop carrying responsibility for emotions that belong to someone else. There is another quiet benefit that many people never expect. The energy once spent defending yourself becomes available for something far more meaningful. You think more clearly because your attention is no longer divided by imaginary arguments. You become more present with the people who deserve your time because resentment no longer occupies so much mental space. Decisions improve because they are guided by reflection instead of emotional urgency. What once felt like self-restraint begins revealing itself as self-liberation. The discipline that initially seemed restrictive gradually becomes the source of greater freedom. This change also reshapes the way you view success itself. Success is no longer measured by how often you are praised or how many arguments you win. It becomes measured by something far more personal. Did you remain faithful to your values when circumstances invited you to abandon them? Did you preserve your integrity when pride demanded retaliation? Did your actions reflect the kind of person you truly wish to become? These questions cannot be answered by anyone else. They belong entirely to you, and that is precisely what makes them so powerful. With time, confidence stops being something you try to display. It becomes something quietly expressed through the consistency of your actions. There is no need to convince others that you possess inner strength because your behavior speaks before your words ever do. Calmness under pressure, patience during disagreement, and thoughtful restraint during moments of provocation become natural expressions of a disciplined mind rather than carefully planned strategies. People often notice this stability even when you are not trying to demonstrate it. The strongest influence is frequently the one that never announces itself. You stop feeling responsible for correcting every misunderstanding or answering every criticism because your confidence no longer depends on other people's agreement. That realization removes an enormous emotional burden from your shoulders. You understand that no amount of explanation can force another person to see you clearly if they have already chosen not to. Likewise, no unfair judgment has the authority to redefine your character unless you quietly surrender that authority yourself. The opinions of others continue existing, but they no longer become the foundation upon which your identity rests. The greatest victory was never proving someone else wrong. It was becoming the kind of person whose peace cannot be borrowed, stolen, or manipulated by passing opinions. At that point, the simple response you give during moments of provocation is no longer just a technique. It becomes a reflection of who you have become, someone who understands that true freedom is found not in controlling other people, but in mastering yourself. That quiet mastery cannot be achieved overnight, nor can it be taken away by a single difficult moment. It is built through countless ordinary choices, each one strengthening the mind until calmness becomes more natural than reaction, wisdom becomes more reliable than impulse, and inner peace becomes the steady foundation upon which the rest of life quietly stands. Every moment you choose calm over impulse, wisdom over pride, and self-mastery over reaction, you strengthen something that no one can take from you. The world will always offer reasons to lose your peace, but the decision to protect it will always remain your own.